Hello everybody, and welcome to our next meetup in the series of our DevOps and Cloud Native meetups. Today the session will be conducted in English for the same reasons as the previous one. We have also audience listening into English, and it's also so it will be available in other countries. Today we are here to speak about Jenkins X, which is the kind of a future generation cloud native CI/CD platform that might replace Jenkins or not. We will talk about it today. It's very exciting for me. This subject is close to my heart, and I've been working on it in a project at a customer in the passing months, in the last few months. And it was very, very cool actually, and we had a lot of fun. So before that, a few words about Cloudzone, my employer. So Cloudzone is a AWS premier consulting partner. We hold a few competencies, not all is listed here, but the main ones, and the one was relevant for today is mainly the DevOps competency. We are also hold the security competency, and we are also a well-architected partner. And we are soon going to also finish with the migration competency. And in more of the context of today, we are also a silver member of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is the foundation that sits under the Apache Foundation and holds the communities and the lifecycle of some of the tools in the Kubernetes ecosystem. And if you're not familiar with the CNCF landscape, I suggest you all do that and go online to cncf.io. In addition, we are also a Kubernetes certified service provider given us by the CNCF, which means that our DevOps teams is fully certified and so on. So my name is Iftach Shenbaum. I'm working for the past 4 years in Cloudzone. I'm currently leading innovation. In my previous roles, I was leading the DevOps team, which today in Cloudzone is quite big. And in the context of today, this team in Cloudzone is conducting lots of projects within the Kubernetes ecosystem, doing things like CI/CD and security. Oops, I'm sorry about that. And security for CI/CD systems and for the software lifecycle workflow and so on. And we are heavily invested in the cloud native landscape, which means that we are always researching new tools. We're trying new tools, and we want to do this work for our customers so they can hear the insights and lessons that we have learned in our experience. Okay, and this is something we see as added value, and we also really like this. So it's kind of cloud agnostics, and we do it in all clouds. And the agenda of today is quite busy. Jenkins X is something that is bigger than could be recapped in, I don't know, even 2 hours. So I've kind of I'm going to focus on where I see that will give you the most of the insights, the valuable insights, so you can kind of already start using Jenkins X and spare you a lot of pain in the beginning. So we are going to talk about, as an introduction, what is Jenkins X and a high level of the architecture, and then we will dive right into it. We will discuss how Jenkins X can be installed and booted on a Kubernetes cluster. We will talk about environments and promotions, how we can create multiple environments, and how we can move applications between one another. We're talking about how we build applications with Jenkins X or within Jenkins X. So it means that we're going to talk about Buildpacks and Jenkins X pipelines, which in turn also work together very closely with the Tekton. And to the ones who is not familiar with Tekton, we will also spend some time about it. We will talk about more of components, just a bit in higher level, because Jenkins X is composed from, I would say, a decent amount of components, and more about that. And then we will talk about a case study, which is it's a project that we did a migration of from a CI/CD pass to AWS to Jenkins X. And at the end, we will talk about the roadmap and the history of, and what we expect that will happen with the classical Jenkins, as I guess the majority of us know it. So let's just dive into it. So what exactly is Jenkins X? So in a very simple way, Jenkins X is a platform for conducting CI/CD automation for Kubernetes. Okay, so it's kind of specifically for Kubernetes. It's designed to kind of hide, to do two things, kind of hide the complexity of Kubernetes. So the developers or even I would say DevOps that work with Jenkins X doesn't really need to know, it's more true for developers, but they don't really need to know Kubernetes. Once they are working with Jenkins X and with the interfaces of Jenkins X, they really don't need to care what's happening in the background. But while doing it, they're still, because using Jenkins X, they are practicing DevOps principles and best practices in that matter. Jenkins X provides many things, and among them it's pipeline automation. Okay, so it provides new frameworks for describing pipelines. It provides GitOps and it provides ChatOps, and we will talk about all of these things today. So the idea as a side effect to increase collaboration and acceleration of software delivery at scale, right? So the idea of Jenkins is to really work in a big scale on an orchestration system like Kubernetes with really low failures, right? So it should be very robust. It provides all kinds of sets of environments that we will speak of, and we will see how it supports multiple teams, and how it provides services to test microservices integration. And then we will see what something that is called preview environments, where we can test changes in real environments and live environments in a very simple way. And this is all done for you by Jenkins X. We're also going to see the approach to installing Jenkins X and how it's supposed to be very easy to immediately restore it on different clusters, or when something happened by mistake, so we can easily restore it to a valid state. And Jenkins X, and it's important to know, it's sponsored by CloudBees, which offers a distribution of Jenkins X with support and also releasing of patches and so on. CloudBees is a company that is behind Jenkins, classical Jenkins. So it's quite important to see that CloudBees itself is actively working on this project and developing this project, and we also talk about it when we are going to talk about the community of Jenkins X. So a word about Jenkins X and Kubernetes. So Jenkins X is built on top of Kubernetes and Docker, but in terms of Kubernetes, it can be changed into any other CRI, because eventually Jenkins X talks to Kubernetes. So as we said, developer doesn't need to know how to work with Kubernetes. Once he's working with Jenkins X, and the interface of Jenkins X might be the UI, might be the CLI, Jenkins X is hiding all the complexity behind, and is providing or presenting a simplified concepts that can be easily adopted, such as environments, promotions, applications, and so on. As I see it, it's also easier for DevOps. Jenkins X is a very opinionated solution. Okay, so the tool selection there, it's all the gray area of selecting tools and testing them. So this is done for you. So imagine that all this process is done for you, and also the validation processes and the test for these tools together is done for you. So you can kind of dive into this opinionated way and just have a path which in front of you, which makes it easier for you, and invest much less efforts as DevOps. And of course, it reduces the need to figure out how to do things right, because you're kind of told how to do things, but you're given with you're being provided with a platform where you can tweak and configure lots of things to fit your exact needs. So it's very flexible in that matter. And I guess the majority of us knows that Kubernetes ecosystem, even specifically in the perspective of software development lifecycle, is pretty big, right? So we have a lot of building tools, we have security tools, we have workflow automations or CI/CD tools, and this ecosystem is quite big. And Jenkins X wants to solve or spare from you the need to spares the pain in this process, and in Cloudzone we have, I wouldn't say it's pain, because in our case it's kind of part of what we do, but we invest quite a decent amount of efforts also getting on top of these tools. So how do we manage environments, how we package our applications or build our code, how we perform continuous delivery, and so on. And again, as I said, the power of Jenkins is in the tool selection, in the life cycle, and the glue between them, right? So the people who use today Jenkins, which compared to Jenkins X is quite 99%, I would say. So the only way, as said, to embrace it or onboard Jenkins X is actually forgetting all the things you know about Jenkins. Jenkins X, except the fact that today CloudBees is actively developing it, it's kind of something totally new, not just in tools, but also in approach and so on. And there was a time where Jenkins was used inside Jenkins X. This time was like Jenkins was fulfilling something called the CI engine or CI/CD engine inside Jenkins X. So imagine that this engine is kind of changeable, or was changeable. And there was a time until April 2020 that Jenkins would still be able to be selected as this engine, but since last April it's obsolete and it's not supported anymore. And so that's meant that Jenkins doesn't exist anymore in the ecosystem of Jenkins X. So again, as I said, it will be easier for you when you start work with Jenkins X as a Jenkins user to just kind of start from scratch. Don't think about Jenkins at all. It would be much easier. So in higher level, because we will dive more into the architecture later on. So we have a Kubernetes cluster. We have the Kubernetes API server in the context of CRDs. Okay, so Jenkins X is providing customer resource definitions to kind of present releases and applications and so on. It holds inside, we will see it later, but it holds inside all kind of components that can communicate with the Git providers, right? So it's about GitOps operations, it's about ChatOps operations, and so on. And it holds multiple environments, not necessarily a fixed size where you can define the environments. We will also see that later on. It provides the services to kind of store all the things. So we are talking about artifact management, we are talking about Docker registries, Helm repositories, and so on. And in the middle inside, as we said, there is the CI/CD engine, which, as you see, I kind of replaced the icon. It was actually the icon of Jenkins here, but it's as said, Jenkins doesn't exist anymore. So I've replaced it. So it's actually Tekton. We will talk about Tekton and how Tekton works in high level. And Tekton here or Jenkins X more specifically is actually generating all the pipeline resources for Tekton, and we will also see that. And etcd, of course, is the database for saving or persisting all of this stuff, because as I said, we are working with custom resource definitions, and everything is enclosed within the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so Jenkins X API or JX API, which can be the user interface or can be a CLI. This is something we will speak about, but it contains the majority of the logic of operations in the platform. Okay, so even if I as a user is performing things, I would use the JX CLI, for example, but also all the pipelines inside and all the pre-baked operations that Jenkins X brings with it is also the logic itself is at the end it's in the JX binary. And putting aside the architecture or the tools used, the model itself, yeah, so we just got a message in the community of Jenkins X. So the model itself is quite easy. We have teams, all right? So teams is actually groups of developers where they can create projects, which we can refer to as microservices. They import them, they create them, and so on. And these projects or applications has many pipelines, right? So anytime we're pushing code into master branch or we're and maybe promoting the application and so on, we're actually triggering pipelines, and we have many pipelines. So I wouldn't dive now into the resolution of what the pipeline and pipeline run is. These are actually resources of Tekton, but this doesn't matter. And these pipelines, they generate releases, which means versions, right? So a team has many applications, which has many versions. And these versions can be moved between environments. And environments, as we mentioned, so or didn't, because everything is tightly coupled with Kubernetes. So an environment is actually a Kubernetes namespace, right? So from our experience, the majority of the cases would be a single team, right? So a single microservice applications with different developers, but there is a way, easy way to actually create another team which has kind of a separate installation of Jenkins X, but there is a way to collaborate between and share resources between teams. When we want to install Jenkins X, okay, so we mentioned that Jenkins X is kind of robust in the way of installing it. So every time there is an issue, I can just install it again or run the process again. So the process of installing Jenkins X platform on a cluster, it's called JX boot. JX boot is actually just the CLI, so JX and boot as an argument. And the idea is, as said, it's declarative, right? So given a blank Kubernetes cluster, I can just run JX boot, and because the installation itself is in a declarative manner, and we have the config files, and we will soon look at it. I can easily restore the valid state of the platform, which is my state, specifically my state, our state, which contains all the configurations which are tweaked for your use case. So, for example, it can be installations that fits EKS or other cloud providers, okay, with Vault by HashiCorp or without. So all kinds of this configuration, but at the end, when I want to restore the things, I can just go to my cluster and run JX boot. Inside JX boot, actually, the pipeline that runs and installs all the things, it's a Jenkins X pipeline, okay? We will talk about what Jenkins X pipelines are. And the way we can, the pipeline itself or JX boot process itself, it has a backend storage, right? It has a backend of all the, for example, all the charts and all the things the process needs to install a cluster. And this is persisted in Git. And it's important to say that we have a kind of a blueprint, right? We have a base repo, Jenkins boot repo, provided by the community that we fork. And from that moment, we are performing JX boot according to this forked repo, and we can do the changes there. And imagine when something needs to change or a fix in the way a cluster needs to be booted, we can actually pour the changes from that original boot config repo by the community and merge it to our boot config repo. And the next time we run JX boot, we kind of get the fixes, which is very cool way to do these things. And the file that we control that controls how the installation will look like. Okay, so not all of the little tweaks, but the main thing is called JX requirements. Okay, I will show it to you in a way. And And then there is JXL, where I rather talk about it later. So I just want to show you. Yeah, so I'll leave this. Okay, so before that, since we were talking about AWS today and the projects we did was on AWS, so Jenkins X also provide a Terraform module for installing EKS, which is kind of already coupled in some way with the Jenkins X needs. So you can choose to use it. Actually, we didn't use it in the last project because we had to use something more extensive and more tweakable, but you can use it also for production, okay? So they have production consideration for this as well. But what I recommend for the people who want to try it very fast, this is very, very easy to start with. So you can just run it and immediately you can install Jenkins X. It also, one of the outputs of this module is the Jenkins X requirements file, which we just spoke about, okay? So this is about that, and let's see now the boot repo. Which each one of you will actually fork so you can boot your own cluster, okay? So without going into details too much inside, there are many things here which it's about charts of all the components that Jenkins X needs. The main one, the core components or additional components, okay? So you can see here Tekton, Nexus, and so on. And the community actually maintains the boot process through this repo, okay? And also it contains the Jenkins X pipelines, which we will talk later, but imagine that the pipeline itself is in charge of booting the cluster, right? So about the syntax of this, we will talk about later, but it's important to say that this also contains the Jenkins X pipelines to boot your cluster. So I will shift to our organizations, and I will just show you that we have a forked, and that's good to understand the demo later, that we have a forked repo from this repo. Okay, and it's called environment Jenkins X demo dev. Okay, it's called like that because the cluster is called JX demo, and this is a best practice to call the GitOps repo for booting Jenkins X. It should be environment, your cluster name, and then dev. It's not a must, but it will make things easier. We'll also show you our cluster. Okay, so because we are talking about installing in AWS, I will show you also today how Jenkins X integrates with AWS. Okay, so we are in our sandbox. Currently, we are in Ireland, and we have just a single cluster that we created with the Terraform provided by Jenkins X. Okay, so we have JX demo. I said this is the name. Version is 1.16 on purpose because we are using some features from 1.16, and that's it. That's quite simple. That's enough for now. So, as said, this is our repo that the JX boot process works with to boot our cluster. So, if we want to do any kind of tweaks, let's say we want to put some I don't know, AWS annotations for the ingress controller service. So it would be using NLB with elastic IPs and so on. And this is what we are doing here actually. So the cluster will easily be resolvable on the internet. I mean the ingress resources. So you can do these things here. It's not something I want to dive too much in. Okay. But specifically, for example, when you want to tweak the UI, you can do from here. When you want to tweak the Jenkins X platform, you can do it from here. You can add things here, that's totally fine. The Jenkins X boot process is aware. Once you will use overrides here, or you will put something that on the surface will conflict with something, Jenkins X actually detects it as a modification and it uses your override. So you can actually do it here. And that means that the state of the cluster or the installation is always saved in Git, which is awesome because that's the best practice, right? Right. So I also want to show you. Now we are actually in the checked out repo. So I can actually run JX boot from here, okay? And I will take the risk and running it again on our existing cluster, even though the demo is there and working, but I feel fine with that because this is part of it. I hopefully I will not destroy it. I like to take the chances in demos. But before that, let's just see the requirements file, okay? So I will not go through all of it, but imagine this is what describes the Jenkins X installation of your cluster, okay? So we have the repo URL, where to boot from. We have details about the clusters, okay, which Git provider, which is the owner in Git, and so on. What is the region, in case we are in provider, EKS, okay? So when you define the provider as EKS, all the kind of things in the JX boot process takes that in mind and delivers stuff proper for this provider, all right? So things about the ECR, okay? And then definitions of the environment, which we'll talk about later. So I can define here our environments, right? I can define if there is a staging environment, UAT environment, production, whatever I want, okay? On top of that, I can define the build tools, like for example, and I can choose my repository. Is it Chart Museum? Is it bucket repo, which we will talk about later? I can define here SSL if I want it to be enabled, and then a cert manager will be used together with Nginx Ingress and so on. So I can define all these things here, okay? And then there is something that is called version stream, and we will talk about it later, but in just one word, version stream is the way that the community can make sure that you are aligned, your repo, your cluster or your booted platform is aligned with them. So if they have some fix they need to do, I don't know, some YAML values in some of the subcomponents of Jenkins X, they can change it with them, and they can propagate this change to you. And this is made by the version stream, and we'll talk about it. Okay? So I will take the chance. Hopefully everything will be right. I will not boot the entire process. So imagine that I can start at some point in the pipeline that boot the cluster and end up in another place. Okay, so for now I put the installing Jenkins X itself, it's a phase in the boot. So I just want it to run. Okay. Let's run it. Okay, so now what actually happens is we are invoking this pipeline from within the checked out boot repo. So if there was any local changes, it would use it. And as said, we are currently doing the phase of only installing the Jenkins X components, so nothing after, nothing before. And this is very easy to kind of make the execution very fast when you know in which phase you made changes. Okay. So let's wait for it to finish, and then we can look at what actually was created. Okay, so for example, I've changed some things, and we can see that the boot picked it up. So if there was any changes on top of the original boot repo from the community, the boot process would comfortably present it. Okay. In the meanwhile, what we can do is kind of go over the namespaces that we have. Okay. Try to ignore. Let's just talk about the JX for now. So we have a namespace called JX. I can easily shift with the JX CLI, which we'll talk after. So I'm currently in the Jenkins X namespace, and this is where all the components for the platform has been installed. So let's get some deployments here. Okay, still executing. So we can see we have all kinds of things. The things it's better not to go over now. We will talk about all of these things later, but here is all the components actually. Okay, so you can see some stuff like the UI. You can see the Tekton pipeline controller, which is the things that actually are in charge of reading pipeline configuration and actually executing it. We can see external DNS here because in the JX requirements file I've said that for the environments I want external DNS. Okay, and we see that the boot finished, right? So actually if I just booted it on top of already my installations that was made just before, so I expect nothing to actually change, which is very cool. And if I by mistakenly deleted some secrets or something that is important for Jenkins X, I could just run this again and it would be restored, and that's very, very, very easy, right? To kind of not waste time on maintenance. All right, so we actually booted the cluster now. I have already invoked Jenkins X CI here, so we can go over it. Okay, so I will just, yeah, so I will take it to the left. So this is the Jenkins X CI. It's kind of the only component in Jenkins X which is not open source. Like you can use it for free, but you cannot see its source. It's maintained by Cloudbees. It's developed by Cloudbees. It's very like a Roku-like UI, if anybody's familiar with. I really like this UI and this approach. So you can see the projects here and other stuff. So we will see this more later, okay? So I just wanted you to see it now. And let's move on with the presentation. Okay, so as said, given a blank cluster, I can just run jxboot. Given a malformed or a damaged cluster, I can run jxboot, and it will be fine. And it's important to say that currently the boot is using behind the scene Helm. Currently is using Helm version 2, but in alpha now there is work on Helm version 3 with Helm file. Okay, so currently all the installations and all the kind of the build of materials in Jenkins X are kind of made of umbrella charts with Helm version time, which later on will be replaced with Helm files. So let's talk about environments. So Jenkins X comes, as said, with all kinds of environments. Okay, so the types of environments is currently it's the dev environment or the development environment. This is actually it's called development environment, but it's actually the environment where all the components of Jenkins X is made of. So we just saw this, right? It's the JX namespace in Kubernetes. This is the development environment where all the core components are. Okay, and this environment can be per team. All right, so if I can create another team, it will be another a namespace with these components made for use by another team. We then have permanent environments. So permanent environments is, of course, Kubernetes namespaces that are there for good. So we're talking about staging, we're talking about production, UAT, and so on. And we have preview environments. So preview environments, these are temporary environments for which are used for live environments for code changes. This is why they're temporary, and they're very useful. We will talk about it in a second. So as I said, all of the above are per team. Okay, so Jenkins X can be across teams and scale for large organizations. Okay, so just one note, on top of the core components, again, like Tekton and like Lighthouse and some other stuff there, Jenkins X presents something called add-ons, and add-ons are components that can extend the basic behavior of Jenkins X. For example, the UI that you just seen I've installed, it's an add-on, right? So I can kind of do JX create add-on, okay? And these are the add-ons currently. So this is, as said, it's opinionated. So you're getting a set of add-ons. It's not something you can add on top or had custom add-ons or so on. This is something you get from Jenkins X. So either it exists or not. So you can see things here like all kinds of things that you might be familiar with. Yeah. Okay. Permanent environments. It's actually true also for preview environments, but these environments are GitHub managed, right? So when there is some pull request that there is being asked to be tested again, all right? So things are being created there. If there is a application that is shifted from one environment to another, it happens through Git. It happens mainly through pull requests, but it happens through Git. So Git is the source of truth and of the state. And later on, Jenkins X picks up this via webhooks and perform the needed changes inside Kubernetes. And environments can share services, right? So imagine that environments can maybe contain all of the services, all right? So production might contain all of the services, okay? But in other environments might not contain all services. Or imagine that a pull request, I don't want to now run all of my microservices in a pull request just to test one microservices that might need just 2 microservices, right? Because at the end, this would be have a big footprint on the overall of the cluster. So I can use service links. So I can tell a service inside a pull request environment or preview environment, it's kind of synopsis, to use when it needs this service, to use just a service from another namespace, maybe from the production, maybe from the integration environment or whatever, okay? So I can kind of do things efficiently. Or when there are 2 teams that consume one of each other's services, okay? So they can just treat it as external service, but it might be under development of another service. So this is a very good use case for service links. Service links, by the way, is just external service type of Kubernetes service. So just to recap this, so imagine we have Git repo per environment. So we have a Git repo for actually for a preview environment, we don't have a repo, okay? But for the permanent environments, we do have a Git repo. So imagine that when there is a preview environment with some change, and this represents a pull request, which in turn is being merged, for example. So then there is a process of delivering these changes to the staging. Let's say for the staging permanent environment, and this is done by a pull request, and we will see all of that. This is done by a pull request to the staging environment, and then it reflects, Jenkins X picks it up, and of course making the changes with pipeline execution in the staging environment, and so on. Later on, it can be manually promoted, like explicitly promoted. That's why we have here some kind of promotion that it just occurs by a merge. And then we have a manual promotion from staging to production. But the process between these environments in terms of what happens in Git and what happens in Kubernetes is quite the same. Okay, so just going a bit deeper. So again, we have the dev environment. We have there the lighthouse. We will talk about it. We have all these components that gives us artifact management, chart repos, and so on. Okay, this example is this contains specifically Nexus or Docker registry, but this can be easily changed through the boot configuration, like the Jakes requirements file. So I can say I don't want Nexus, I want bucket repo. I don't want Docker registry. I want to work with AWS ECR. That's fine. That's great, right? And Tekton, of course. Okay, and then next to it we have temporary namespaces, which present pull requests environments, and then the rest of the permanent environment. So a word about preview environments. So we said it gives us live temporary environments for testing code. This is great for collaboration. This is great for QA before they're approving pull requests and so on. They live as long as the pull request represent them live. So once their pull request is closed or merged, there is a cron process in Jenkins X that kind of pick it up and destroys these namespaces. And imagine that for each service, we can kind of extend or define the scenario in which it needs to be tested when it goes to preview environment. So how is this working? So once we import a project into Jenkins X, right, and it doesn't have nothing, let's say it just have code, and Jenkins X, what we will do during the import, it will generate many things for it. It will make it really fit to Jenkins X, so it kind of onboards this application, let's say a Go application to the thing. So one of the things it creates, I want to show you this. So today we will work with the 2 microservices that we used in our previous meetup on AWS on the app mesh. So the ones who saw it now, you will see it again. So we kind of have 2 applications. One is called color controller, and which just give colors, and the other one is the dashboard, which just present this nice in the cubes. It's very cool. In the last meetup, it was very useful. Here we will use it in a more flattened way because we are more interested on the CI/CD and not on the application side. And if I will go inside this, so what I can see is a folder called charts. I didn't create this. This was created during the import. These projects are already imported into Jenkins X, and that's why we see them here, right? And there was a service. There is a chart called preview. So each time we are importing an application, we have a preview chart. So we have the chart itself for the service, which here we can kind of make changes that are globally true or globally needed for, like, how is this chart needs to have values like globally or change behavior globally. But preview environment is an umbrella chart. Umbrella chart, by the way, when I say umbrella chart, I mean kind of a bill of materials, which means just a metrics or a list of services and their versions, right, with additional webhooks and so on. So preview environment, it's the chart that will be used when there is a pull request open for this service. And in the preview environments, I can say when I make a change to the color controller and I want to test it in preview, I want also the dashboard application installed with it because I have to check them together, okay? But not the others, for example. So this is done with the preview chart, and this is why the preview chart is not something that is belong to all the services. Like, it's more like in the perspective of the service that each service has its own preview chart. Each service defines its own dependencies, and so on. Okay. If there is any questions, you write me in the chat. And as you know, this is a recorded webinar, so I can in the meanwhile answer questions. So feel free to text me the questions. Promotions. So we said once given the environment, I want to promote applications between them. So once I've merged a pull request, for example, and the changes reach staging, and now everything works great in staging, I want to promote the application. Promotion can be both manual, not both, either manual or automatic. Right? So when would I want automatic? So for example, of course, after a pull request is or a preview PR or a pull request has been approved, I want immediately the application to read somewhere, to read some lower environment like a development environment or integration environment. But on the other end, when we want to shift from staging to production, I might not want it to be automatic, right? So then I can manually maybe during a pipeline, but still manually, explicitly saying I want to promote now this version to the next environment. The promotion itself is also being executed with Jenkins X pipelines. You will see it every time. I will say this is mostly likely executed with the Jenkins X pipeline. We will talk about these pipelines later on. Okay. So before we move on, so for example, what I can see in the UI of Jenkins, all right? So everything I do with the UI, I can do on the CLI, okay? Actually, they're using the same, the same APIs, which they consume Kubernetes API, which is based on the CRDs. So they're actually doing the same. And I can see now two environments. I can see the staging environment. I can see the production environment. I can see there is the same version of the dashboard in both environments. I can see there is the color controller in different environments. So it means that the color environment was still not promoted to production, okay? Because the production environment is set up with a manual promotion. So let's check it out. So I can do, for example, JX get end, and I can see my environments, and I can see that staging is automatic, and I can see that the production is manual. All right? So what I can do is I have the promote here somewhere. Okay, so what I can do here is I can take the service mesh dashboard, color controller, and shift it to production, right? So I need to choose the correct version, and it's 11. Okay. So what happens now on the background? What Jenkins X does on the background is creating a pull request, right, to the from the GitOps repo from the GitOps repo of the staging environment to the production one, right? So if I will pick here not to hide GitOps, I will see it, right? So imagine that in the UI there is always all the things related to the GitOps and the things related to the applications themselves. So pipeline and builds of the applications, they will always be here. But if I want to see pipelines that are related to the GitOps or the promotion or the deployment in the permanent environments, I will see it once I choose to see all. And the PR build itself is kind of a validation for the things. And then when the PR is merged, because I'm doing a promotion to production, so it's going to be merged, and then there will be the actual master build of the JX production, right? Okay. Okay, so we can already see, actually I don't know where this came from. So actually we can see now that the call control is waiting for a pod upgrade, and we can see that it's from version 10 to version 11. Okay. I can always, from some environment, I can pick and try to see the application. All right, this didn't work. Sorry, because there is a reason for that. Because I chose that in staging, I don't want to expose the service mesh control, the call control, because this is kind of a backend microservice. All right, so I chose to do it, but I can explicitly choose what to expose and what not to, and we will see it later. But I can see the dashboard in the staging environment, right? Okay. Okay. So actually this is how it looks like when it runs. So I would say it's still limited kind of UI, but on the other hand that's pretty cool because most of the controls are being made from ChatOps, and here is kind of only currently watch only. And we will wait for this to finish, and we will see it later. Oh, okay. So it's still it's upgraded. Okay. So now I know that when I'm going to production and I will view the application. Sorry, this is the call controller, and it is exposed on production. So I can see also the application, and note that the ingresses are different, right? Ingresses are different, and it's maintained for each environment. Cool. So given so let's say a whole life cycle, right? So yeah. Okay. So let's edit some code. So just to give you a full life cycle. So let's go to the kernel controller and just change the backend color it sends to the dashboard. Okay. Let's call it light blue. And instead of committing the change directly to master, let's create a pull request. Right? Cool. So what happens when I create a pull request? So immediately there is a PR build. Okay, so PR, of course, I can go and watch the PR and so on. And we see now that the PR build is running. Okay. In the background, as said, of course, there is all kind of working in the JX namespace, right? There is all the servers that receive the hooks of the pull request, is doing the things. They are updating the pull request. Again, we will talk about these things. But imagine that you're getting all of this from Jenkins X. You don't need actually to set anything. I didn't set anything on GitHub. I didn't say the hooks myself. The JX boot process configured all of the Git repos environment that were defined in the JX requirements file. And I kind of get all of this out of the box. It's really cool. And it really makes you start fast. All right. So what's the pull request? So the pipeline itself it's doing whatever it needs to do, the test and so on. But once, if we can see inside the pipeline, once it will end, it will create us a preview environment. And preview environment, it's operation, a Jenkins X operation. Okay, you can run it yourself. It's a Jake's preview command, right? So imagine that all the things we do here still. Okay, I don't want to create the preview, but so I can, it's a whole world here, but the UI is doing quite the same. So everything you see, you can do with the Jake's binary. It contains all of the flows, all of the needed clients. So Helm is inside, everything is inside, and it can do many things, this binary. Okay, so when we create a preview, all right, so actually what happens in the background, right? So if we will get some namespaces. So I'm not sure if this is this because this is PR3 and we had a PR before. By the way, this means that the pull request, the second pull request is still open, right? Because we have still this namespace. Okay, so let's wait for this. Soon we will have another namespace, right? So it was added. Okay, so we will let it finish. As a developer, I don't see all this. For example, what I'm interested is that I will get here a link for the pull request for the preview environment. Okay, so this currently comments by me, but because I set up Jenkins to use my user, but what you need to do is, of course, create a robot user made from Jenkins X operations, and he will do the ChatOps and the comments and so on. So now we see that the PR build succeeded, and we have a pull request. So what I can do is just click it, and I get the application. Right? And because this build was for the color controller, the things I get when I view the applications, it's the color controller. But when I will do the same for the dashboard, this URL will lead me to the dashboard, right? Which looks like this. Okay. But still I can, of course, browse. Okay, so this is, look at the subdomain. The subdomain tells me this is a build for the service mesh color controller from pull request 3. So it means I can also now shift inside this temporary preview environment also to the dashboard, right? And now we have the change here. We have the blue. But in the staging environment, we still have orange, right? So I could say I checked everything, it looks awesome, and I go and I merge the pull request. So once I merge it, what happens? All right? So first of all, there is a release build, right? Because we are merging into master, we are creating a release. And then, because we have the next environment, the staging environment set up with an automatic promotion, once this is finished, there will be automatic pull request to the GitHub repo of the staging, which will in turn invoke the deployment Jenkins X pipeline for that environment. Okay, and then we expect to see the shifting here to the next version. Okay, so once this has happened, we will see it. I don't want to waste time. We will get back into it. So just remember, in staging, still have the orange. In the pull request environment, which I think will be maybe dead already. No, but soon it will be dead after it's merged. We have the light blue, and we expect after this finishes this change to take place in staging. So I'm going back to the presentation now. Okay, we can also already see that there is something going on here, and it's being upgraded in staging. It knows it's in the build. It gives me the link to the build. Right? It's very cool. It's very comfortable. Okay. Right. Yeah, so we will let it, I just want to wait a bit because now in the Jake's promote, again, this is Jake's promote is something by Jenkins X. This build will wait. What actually this build is doing is performing the pull request, you can see here, to the staging environment. So in the same time, there will be two builds. So this build now waits. It created it created a pull request on the staging environment, and is doing a long polling on the status. So if I go to builds, and I will not hide the GitOps builds, I will now see it. I will now see a promotion build to the staging environment, right? And this will actually do the deployment after the validation here. Okay, so we can see now already that from this version is going to the next, right? Cool. Just one last thing, not last thing, but for AWS now, just so you know, because we chose not to work with Chart Museum, we chose to work with something that is called Bucket Repo, which is a lightweight artifact management and Helm repository. We can actually see that we save. Jenkins X also can work with Vault. We will talk about it, and is doing all the things it needed here. But I'm talking about these three. So the logs bucket is, of course, for keeping all the logs of builds which are historical builds, right? So when I go to some build and I go to the logs, this is actually pulled from S3. Okay, and what I wanted to show you now that the bucket repo is, you can see that it's actually doing the, I have to close the Slack, it's incredible. Okay, so we actually see the charts here. Okay, so Jenkins X in my setup, because I want to use the AWS services, is using this. And also, if we will go to the ECR registry, we will see there the images, of course. I don't want to show it now. So it's finished. So let's see the environment, and it's still upgrading. Okay, so I don't know what I will see here. So, okay, it's upgrading now. Okay, there is just one replica currently of the thing. So there is no ready pod. So of course this is easily changeable. Okay. Okay, let's continue and see it after. Okay, cool. So applications and add-ons. So applications in Jenkins X is actually our services. It's actually our workloads. And once you're doing import, right? If you're doing import, which I did, right? You can import application from many places, right? From Git, from local storage, and so on. And while doing import, you can define many things, right? So one of the things is, how do we want to build this application? Do I want Jenkins X to figure out how to build it? Okay, so I see a Maven file, and I see, I don't know, a Scala code, so I can build Scala with Maven. Maybe I want to build Scala with Gradle, and so on. So this is something called a Buildpack, and we will talk about it in a minute. But I can import the projects, or I can also create quick starts, which, okay, quick start, which ends up with the same thing. It ends up with an application. Okay, this is actually what you see when you look in the UI. Okay, so it's important to understand that there is a lifecycle on it. I can delete it. I can promote it, and so on. We just promoted an application. Right? Add-ons, it's something else. Add-ons it's applications, or it's applications that can extend the core behavior of Jenkins X. Right? So imagine I want to onboard image scanning capabilities. So I can just install an add-on that do it. In this case, Anchor. Right? I want monitoring, so I can do this add-on and install Prometheus. Of course, I can install Prometheus by myself, but when you are consuming Jenkins X add-ons, you know that there was automation there that was made to integrate these add-ons properly with Jenkins X, right? So it offloads me it spares me with the research and the understanding of how to do things right with Jenkins X. So if I know Prometheus very well, I would still want to use an add-on. Even better, I understand Prometheus, and it will integrate very fast with Jenkins X, right? So, if I'm not mistaken, this is the command, and this is what you get from Jenkins X today. And we have researching Jenkins X a year ago already, and the list was much smaller, but this is something that it grows, right? Okay, before we talk about Buildpacks, let's just see what happened here. Okay, Okay, so this was promoted, okay, it jumped up. So this was promoted to 12, this is 11. So now when I view in the staging, okay, again, we want to go to the, because we upgraded the, we are not exposing on staging the dashboard, right? Sorry, I mean the color controller. So let's do mesh dashboard. Okay, so now we see that it's not orange anymore, but if I will check production, it would be still orange. Now the only thing I need to do is, of course, promote, just as we promoted before, 12 to production. I will not do it currently, because we've seen it already. Cool. Right, so let's talk about Buildpacks. So some of you might have worked with draft Buildpacks. Jenkins X Buildpacks are very similar. The idea behind a Buildpack is that you give code to a Buildpack, and the Buildpack will end up in delivering you both image building capabilities that suits your code. Okay, we've discussed some things, Maven or Gradle, so it's about the build tools, it's about the runtimes, it's about the language. Okay, so Buildpack gives that to you. Okay, Jenkins X tries to match you a Buildpack automatically according to your project. So if you don't want any kind of customization and you have something simple and you just want to be able to build it and onboard it to the Jenkins X CI/CD platform, maybe a default or the default Buildpacks are good enough for you, right? And maybe not. Okay, so Buildpacks delivers these things. Buildpacks also deliver the Jenkins X pipelines, all right? So the default Buildpacks, so if we will go to this website, this is the Buildpacks that is it provided you by the community, right? That have passed some validations and tests, all right? So we are using, for example, Go and JavaScript Buildpacks. How can I know it? So if I will, let's close some tabs here, blah, blah, blah. So if I will go to one of my, okay, for example, this, right? Okay. So this is already imported project, and it import me all the Jenkins X already import me the files that I needed. So the charts, the Docker file, these things I didn't create, none of them. So here you can see the Jenkins X pipeline, the Docker file, the charts, the scaffold, which we'll talk about later about scaffold and Kaneko. So this was created for me, right? So let's see the Jenkins X pipeline. What do I see here? I see that there is nothing here. It's just using a Buildpack, okay? And an extra thing that you need to set when you're using AWS ECR with Jenkins X, you have to add this. But that's it. Like I just used the Buildpack, the Go Buildpack, which we just saw it. It's here, right? Not here, sorry. This one. Yes, here. Go. And it contains all the things. So here is the pipeline. Here is the Jenkins X pipeline that's doing all the promote, the post build, the build. Okay, because this is enough, it's good enough for me. But I can actually reuse this Go, inherit from this Go Buildpack and override things. Okay, so So Buildpacks also support inheritance. So I can kind of inherit from a Buildpack. Okay, this one is inheriting from, we can see here it inherits from something called Classic. Okay, there used to be, there is some abstraction of the Buildpack which are not specifically for Kubernetes, but there is only Kubernetes now. So, but it works like that. Okay. Okay. Okay, so, and you can of course build your own Buildpacks. Well, and that's great for easy onboarding new projects. So imagine you are an organization and bigger organizations with a big development team, and you're I don't know, every week or every month there is a new microservice, and you want it to be onboarded to and get CI/CD from Jenkins X ASAP, right? So you can pre-bake as a DevOps team. You can create Buildpacks which suit for you, that contains the pipelines that suits for you, and so on. And as said, you can reuse Buildpacks components from phases from other components. So I can, for example, in my Buildpacks only override the release phase, and all the building of the image, I don't care, for example, will be the same as the parent Buildpack, and so on. But this is very good for onboarding new projects and immediately get the best practices of your organization into this new application. Okay, so both my projects that I'm using, I didn't do anything in terms of writing pipelines or anything, all right? So it was just this one that is a Go application that Jenkins X automatically detected and gave me this Buildpack. And also the dashboard, which is Express Server of Node.js. Which is JavaScript Buildpack. Okay, so I didn't do anything, but I still get great CI/CD. I get preview environments. I get ChatOps and all these things. It's quite awesome. Okay. So we've talked about Jenkins X pipelines, right? So Jenkins X introduces a new format, yet another format. So for the ones who use Jenkins, so today you might be working with groovy pipelines, right, or the classical steps pipelining, and so on. Jenkins X provide a new simplified YAML-based format for defining Jenkins X pipelines. Each Jenkins X pipeline is actually containing logical pipelines for different phases. So we are talking about release. This is when you merge something into master. It can be the master of the application. It can be the master of the Git repo, the GitOps repo, like for a permanent environment. And also for feature, all right? So I didn't use feature here, but you can also define a pipeline for phase, what happens when you merge changes into a feature, when a developer works with a feature branch. And inside these pipelines, you have also stages, okay? So these all stages, imagine that they can be inherited from a parent pipeline. So we saw that a pipeline can extend another pipeline. So we can actually build a general pipeline and then some specific pipelines, and they can be reused building blocks from one another to really to code the pipelines in an efficient manner, reusable manner, collaborative manner, and so on. It's very cool. Behind the scene, okay, so behind the scene we have a Tekton controller. We have Tekton. We will talk about Tekton later. But Tekton, just for now, so it will be understood. So Tekton is a cloud-native framework for pipelining engine for Kubernetes. We can see it here. There is a Tekton controller pipeline, right? So what actually happens that Jenkins X, the binary again, knows how to interpret a Jenkins X pipeline, this YAML format, and generate the Tekton converted resources, right? So the Tekton controller can pick it up. So this is actually happens every time there is a pipeline executed, okay? And we can see that easily when we will go into each build. It doesn't matter if it's a GitOps build, because we say that the GitOps builds, which means the promotion builds, promotion pipelines from permanent environment to another, and so on, and also the applications themselves, they are all Jenkins X pipelines. So the first thing you will see, yeah, maybe I have some problem there. So the first phase in a Jenkins X pipeline is actually creating the effective pipeline, which means the conversion of the Tekton CRDs, right? Instances, right? So when we are working with Jenkins X, we actually have custom resource definition for both, because we have Tekton, right? We have Jenkins X. Okay? So you will always see this. So, and if you have an issue in your Jenkins X pipelines in means of format, you did something that it's illegal in a Jenkins X format. Okay, it can be valid YAML-wise, but let's say you did some problem with the Jenkins X pipelines itself. It will kind of it will fail here because this is a kind of compilation of your Jenkins X code into Tekton resources. Yeah, it supports loops, global variables, stage level variables. It looks we are not going to go much into it. I will show you maybe an example. Okay, but it's really not the point here of this session. But so, for example, we have an example of override. So we can actually override, right? Define overrides. Okay, in some place we wanted to override the way we promote to production, to do some things, other things, and so on. Okay. So we could override a specific phase of the release. Okay. A more robust or big pipeline is this. So when I use a pipeline of my own, I can have the possibility to imagine I can use a build pack and override some phases of the build pack, but I can also say I don't want to use any build pack. I want to write my own pipeline. Still, I need to how to say it? I still need to embrace the phases and use the phases as a pull request and pre-build and so on. So Jenkins X knows when to exactly invoke or execute this phase. So we will do it only on a pull request, okay? But then later on, when there is a release phase, it will do this pipeline. But I can really define the whole pipeline, right? So I might not want to use a build pack. I want to use my own code. Or I would create my own build pack and this would be the full pipeline there. Okay? So this is Jenkins X pipelines, right? And to do custom things, all right, when, I don't know, you have integration tests alongside E2E tests and unit tests and you want to parallel them, so you can do it, okay? So this is something specific you need, so you won't find it in a build pack, in a pre-baked build pack, but you can do it yourself. So we can parallel things, okay? We can define volumes for this specific phase or in a more global level, so it will be effective for several steps and so on. Okay, so it's kind of there is a Jenkins X pipeline reference, I think, so you can deep dive there for the syntax and you can see it there, right? Cool. Yeah. So about Tekton in it, right? So we said Tekton is something we really like in Cloudzone. It's something we are kind of trying to drive a customer to consider start using it or test it. So Tekton is a cloud-native framework for CI/CD on top of Kubernetes. It's based on controllers and CRDs, so it's actually it's using the operator pattern, right? So using the Kubernetes as API and persistency at CD as in the database through the CRDs. It's considered lightweight and fast. We see performance both in our project and in other tests we did. The Tekton is actually performs much better in a big environment, right? Because it's cloud native. It gives performance which, as we see it until now, it's better than Jenkins. There is no JVM involved. This is lightweight containers doing the things. Of course, there is JVM where you build applications, but other pipelines and so on, it's just works faster as we see it. The basic idea in Tekton is that each step of the pipeline, actually all of the pipeline is executed in a single pod, and it uses init containers, because init containers, what's the idea between init containers? They are running one after another, so this is kind of crucial for pipelining, right, for workflow, so there is one after the other, right? They share the same file system, right, of the pod, right? So that's how they did it, and you can see here pipelines that are already completed. You can see here 10 containers, 8 containers, and if I will present the list of containers, you will see that there is let's try to do it. You can see actually all the phases of your container, right? So if I will go to the list of containers, Okay, it will be hell like this, but we can see step promote, the promote phase, and we can see Helm release, and we can see all these phases here. So this is how Tekton works. But again, Jenkins X gives you the Jenkins X pipelines syntax. You don't touch Tekton, right? In Jenkins X. Important to know that in April 2020 was the last moment where Jenkins, the classical Jenkins, was supported in Jenkins X. So imagine there was a phase until April that you could use Jenkins, the classical Jenkins, as the CI/CD engine inside Jenkins X. It was hell. I have to say that we used it. It was kind of terrible, and we will talk about it on the lesson learned. Because we did our project really in the moments where major things was changed in Jenkins X, right? So it was quite difficult. And it gives you capabilities of building and testing and deploying across multiple cloud providers and on-premise and so on. It's purely running within the Kubernetes cluster, and as you can see, by 19 alone, there was a decent amount of releases and commits and contributions, and since then it's kind of been accelerated, and by now the numbers are higher. And as we said, Jenkins X or JX, the Jenkins binary, is kind of containing all the work operations Jenkins X is doing. It's been used internally in all this pipelines of the Buildpacks and the things you get out of the box inside. If you will see the pipelines, JX is kind of everywhere. Maybe it's something worth saying, right? So you see here, he's managing releases versions, he's managing descriptions and release notes on a pull request. It's which is here the changelog. He's doing the Helm releases, he's doing the promotion, so he's doing many things, and it's quite huge. Okay, it's doing a lot of stuff. Okay, it's also doing the boot, right? So it contains the pipelines to boot, and you can really maintain all the environment through this. What it means, as I see it, is by the time I think the UI will use more and more features of JX, and it will allow you more things, like, I don't know, actively performing actions from the UI and so on. So kind of the sky's the limit here, and that's why we see a great future for this. Okay, and then there is the JXL. JXL is it's another release of the JX binary, which contains alpha features. It's where the community works, mainly the engineers from CloudBees, on bringing new features. You can download it. I think I have an old version of it, yes. So it will look similar to the JX binary, but it will contain other stuff. You can do other stuff with it. For example, I see features for better pulling build logs or filter build logs, and so on. But these are alpha features, okay? You don't want to use them in production. This is also something I will talk about in the lesson learned, because we tried to use it. Yeah. And let's talk about additional components, okay? So we said Jenkins X is kind of a loosely coupled, uses loosely coupled architectures. It's tried to ride on existing products or tools that have their own teams that validate them and work on their quality. This is something we find let's say we experience great value in this, right? So the thing is, where Jenkins, the classical Jenkins, has everything in it with all the plugins and all the additional, it's I don't know, compared to this, I think this is kind of a historical approach, of course, the monolithic approach. But I just want to say that we really feel the value, even though Jenkins X at first glance is kind of intimidating because it has a lot of components in it. So additional components, it thinks there are core components or additional components. So for example, Lighthouse and Pro, these are ChatOps servers, and you can see it here. Okay, Lighthouse should be here somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Vault, HashiCorp Vault, it can be used for Jenkins internally to keep all the secrets of Jenkins X platform with it. The default installation of Jake's boot will not use Vault, it will use local secrets, so it's kind of persisted in the DevOps engineer machine and in secrets of Kubernetes secrets. A bucket repo can replace Chart Museum, Nexus, and it's integrated with S3. But of course, you can choose in the Jake's requirements file, you can set up Chart Museum and Nexus, that's fine. These are all components you can use. Velero is a Kubernetes backup. John from the DevOps team in Cloudzone will talk about it in a short. Canico. So Canico is something that, like if I will show you here. So in the Jake's requirements, I work with Canico. I think it's already the default. It was not the default. So Canico, it's a secured image build. It doesn't need to share the Docker socket, the Docker daemon socket, and it's working in a user space alone. So you can actually build Docker images in a secure way without needing to mount this, the Docker socket all the time. There is something called Fabric 8 expose controller. So Fabric 8, it's kind of a suite of tools that has historical. It exists for a long time. It has a lot of association with OpenShift, Red Hat OpenShift, and Fabric 8 is something that later on, if I'm not mistaken, was purchased and as a part of some acquisition, and Fabric 8 became a group that develops all kinds of things for Kubernetes. So for example, Fabric 8 plugins for building Docker containers and stuff for IDEs and so on. So one of the things that Jenkins X uses is Fabric 8 expose controller. It's something that if you know about upfronts, it's something that can ease your pain. So you understand how actually workloads are exposed outside, right? So Fabric 8 can, through annotations, can expose things with ingress, can expose things with other things, but you are controlling how you expose things in Jenkins X with Fabric 8 expose controller. He will be in charge of doing the ingress work and so on. You don't need to do it, okay? And so on. So you need to get used to the fact that there is components, moving components in Jenkins X, right, all the time. And this is something that at first, like a year ago when we started to research Jenkins X, we said this is kind of crazy. This is kind of very hard to maintain, so how is being done? So I will skip this for a second and we'll go back to it, and John will talk about Velero, but and I want to speak short about ChatOps. So Jenkins X provides ChatOps. Okay, so in the meantime, so we can do this, I want to create a pull request so we can demonstrate the GitOps. So let's make another code change. Let's create a pull request. Okay. We will wait until the preview environment will be created. Okay, so I should have a build here now, a few seconds ago, great. Okay, in the meantime, let's talk about it. So Jenkins X provides ChatOps through a ChatOps server, right? So it can be Prow, it can be Lighthouse. So Lighthouse is going to be the default. Prow was the default for a long time. Lighthouse it's kind of express lightweight ChatOps server with the majority of features by Prow. So they are very similar. The commands in the chat are kind of the same. And when you want to understand what you can do with Lighthouse in means of commands, you actually read the documentation. It helps developers collaborate on pull requests, right? So it supports all the assigns, operations, and it looks good to me. And re-triggering pipelines in Jenkins X from there and so on. It's actively refreshing. So imagine that the chat server is always updating things that are happening in Jenkins X which are relevant for this pull request or another. It updates all the time so the developer can actually see what's going on. Is the build finished? Is the build failed? To pass the pull request to other phases and so on. So it contains the hooks, which this is the way of the Git repo to tell Lighthouse contains both hooks and the ChatOps commands. So the hooks, imagine that there is a pull request to the staging environment and the validation, the PR build is finished, and then there is a merge to the staging environment GitOps repo. So then it lets the Lighthouse know that it's time to trigger the pipeline that deploys to staging, okay? And on the other hand, so it has the hooks, but it also has ChatOps commands. So when I update or give command in a pull request page, then Jenkins X can react to that, right? Also part of this, part of both, it's something called Tide. And this is something that is in general associated only with pull requests and is doing all kinds of operations on auto-merging them when there is an automatic promotion. It also grease means supposed to be green, right? And it also knows how to take several pull requests that are running kind of simultaneously. And when they're finishing, kind to squash them and to make it as a single change. This is why it's called Tide, right? So when there is a lot of changes coming, it knows how to kind of minimize or dedupe or whatever you call it. Okay, so let's just see if we got the PR. So we already got the preview environment, okay, which is cool. And now let's say that the pipeline failed, right? So the pipeline succeed now, but let's say I did something wrong. So imagine that now everything I will say here, all the commands I will write here, whether they are valid or not, the ChatOps server will receive it, the Lighthouse, the one that's running in the JX namespace, and we will do the things we said. It might trigger pipelines, it might update here things, and so on, right? So for example, I can do retest. So a developer can retrigger. Okay. Retest, is it? Or rerun? Wait, let's see. I think it's rerun. Rerun. I think this didn't do anything. Wait. This didn't do anything. It's rerun, I guess. Okay, rerun. Or I might, don't remember. Right. So we can see the things that we can, that is supported here. So it's supposed to be retest. So I will check in a second why it didn't work, but there is a lot of stuff here. I wonder if this is related to the Lighthouse merge status. Let's say bark. So barked worked. So we know that everything is fine from the ChatOps. Okay, there should load at the end for some reason. Okay, I don't know what's happening. Or something is very slow. Okay, let's give it some time. I will check it later. I'm not missing anything here, right? No. Just a second. Let's open the PR. The PR is good, it's red. If we will go again to this mesh dashboard, sorry, without the controller. Okay, we'll see red, so we have this change here. Let's go to the PR again. Let's try again. It's worked today. I don't know why it's not working now. Okay, I don't know now. I'll check it later, but trust me, this works fine. I think it's related to something that I don't understand currently. Okay. So anyway, I can invoke the things from here. I can do all kinds of things like looks good to me. I can and so on, and you can find all of the things here, right? Okay, this worked, but why the retest is not working? Maybe because it passed. Maybe I can rerun only when it's failed. I don't remember, but you can check it out later. Okay, so I want to continue talk about the fact that Jenkins X is composed from many components. So we were kind of intimidated by it, but Jenkins X provide you with a build of materials that's supposed to help you in maintaining this dependency matrix, so it can maintain the correct versions of all these components that they know that works together. This is a pattern that we in Cloudzone we do in many projects when we implement continuous integration for microservices. We want to be able to kind of certify versions where the version itself it's a list of all the services with a specific version, and Jenkins X does that with something they call version stream. So version stream, if we will see on the Jenkins X requirements file when we boot the cluster, right? We can see what version stream are we using, right? And it comes from the Jenkins X versions. So imagine that the Jenkins X versions, right, which is exactly this, it's something maintained by the community, which contains all of the information of the versions of the charts that the boot, for example, the JX boot process is working with, right? And they kind of test the things here every time there is a change here, and when everything is good, they kind of release a new version of the version stream that you can then pull, which this effectively means you are upgrading your Jenkins X cluster. Okay, to a newer version. So when you upgrade Jenkins X, it's actually shifting to use a newer version in the version stream. And there, Jenkins X is maintaining the versions of all these components we're talking about. So we kind of not need to worry too much about the fact that there is a lot of components and a lot of services. And from our experience, it works very well. We didn't have any integration issues with this stuff. I want to kind of, we don't have much time, but I will try to build this with a wrong, I'm not sure how much time we have. Okay, forgive me, but the retest, it's working, it bothers me, but you can check me out. Yeah, so let's let John Burokov talk about Velero.
Hi guys, my name is Evgeny, aka John. It's quite a long story why John, but we'll leave it for the next time. We're here to actually speak about Velero, which is an open source tool for backing up and disaster recovery for your cluster. We've been working with Velero for quite some time now, and it actually makes you kind of a master of your cluster and gives you the opportunity to actually play, test, experiment, do whatever you want with your cluster, including trying new technologies, new revisions, and breaking it as you want. without the fear of actually losing all your work. Now, the way it works is it basically can support any type of storage. Okay, it can be a third party, it can be any cloud provider, whether it's Azure or GCP or AWS, or whatever is needed. The SDK for Velera is what you actually install on your server itself, so on your PC or on your instance from which you're managing your cluster, exactly like you would install kubectl or Helm. It uses your credentials to actually access your cluster. And on the cluster itself, with the Velero commands, you can install the storage plugin. So the storage plugin itself is going to give you an ability to connect to your storage, whether it's a S3 bucket or GCR or the Azure repositories within the storage account, and there it will store the Velero backups. Now you can list them, you can describe them, you can manage them, by like search for them by names or whatever. It's very versatile. Now, eventually what Velero does for you, it's not only just backing up your cluster and that's it. It gives you a kind of a flexibility of the backup itself. Meaning what? It gives you the option to actually select which namespace, which resource, which object. Like it's basically everything that your cluster is made of. Every component you can either exclude or include or customize what exactly you want to back up in there. Now, if you are backing up the entire cluster, that's totally fine. And we were working with a lot of really, really big and immersive clusters, and it did not take very long. I can tell you that the most it took is about, I don't know, 3 to 4 minutes to actually back up and restore as well. So this is really cool because you're not going to waste any time while you're doing, your work. And it gives you the, as I said, it gives you the flexibility of actually backing up specific resources or the entire cluster. Now, regarding the storage, you might be asking yourself, okay, what about the storage? Because Azure and AWS or on-prem or whatever, there are different storage classes, there are different disks, different types of disks, different types of file systems, or etc. And you're correct if you are asking yourself this question specifically, but Velera does have the option to back up and restore using the storage classes and the YAMLs as is. So let's say if you got an AWS cluster or GCP cluster, you do have the storage classes and PVs and PVCs and etc. They will be backed up according to the YAML, which means if you're going to if you you have a use case of migrating the clusters inside the same cloud provider, it's going to be extremely easy, smooth like butter. There's not going to be any issues at all because the entire YAML is already configured. So the cloud provider knows how to read it, he knows how to provision everything and how to interconnect everything. Now, migrating between clouds, it's a little bit of a different story because as we spoke before, everything is different, right? So maybe the underlying storage and disk and file system are the same, but the way that the cloud providers are provisioning it and the API calls and etc. are extremely different. Now, Valeria has, for this specific use case, a plugin that is called Restic plugin. It's also a third-party plugin, but they're using it inside the Valera tool, and they're using it incredibly smooth, and it's very convenient. What this plugin does is basically translates the file system itself, like the storage account or the PV and the PVCs and everything. It basically translates to a file system. And in the YAML, like if you're gonna back up with this Restic feature, you're not gonna see something like a storage class and the label of the storage class and like GP2 or in AWS and so on. You're just gonna see the file system itself. Okay, it's gonna be like a really big list of things that this disk has inside it. Now, what this does is gives you an option to actually transfer migrate the entire cluster from a one cloud provider to another. Now, what it does is just gets all of your disk, all your PBs, PVCs, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It just, let's say it transfers from GCP to AWS. Now, when AWS receives this cluster and it starts looking at this disk and the storages, it finds the file system that it needs to restore. It doesn't really care which type of storage you used before, okay? It's just going to provision the EBS. It's going to provision all the needed components behind it, and it's going to just inject the file system into that storage block. And that's it, you're done. We actually had a use case of this already while we migrated from GCP to AWS, and it went super smooth. Now, the only thing that you need to do with the resting feature, like for the resting feature to work, is just add some annotations to every and each pod that uses a storage or a PP or PVC. It's a little annotation, you can find it online, that will actually tell Valero to use the resting option when you're backing up. Everything has to do with the storage, okay? Now, regarding the capabilities of Valero, eventually, you can migrate at one time and make a manual backups and manage it by yourself, and it's totally fine. It's not a big issue, not a problem. It's not an issue at all, in fact, but Valero has the capability of scheduled backups, which, as you can guess, basically means that you're configuring a specific schedule, which is like a cron job, and Valero will back up whatever you tell him, okay, per schedule. Each schedule can have different backup components, either the entire cluster or some different type of namespaces or services that you want. And that's it. You basically configure it, you run the Valero on your cluster, and you forget about it. That's it. And we had use cases where the cluster got destroyed, either by mistake or intentionally, but then they kind of had a change of hearts or whatever reason that might be, and it was a pain. It was a huge setback. We had to restore everything from scratch manually, and yeah, we lost a lot of valuable times. The customer lost a lot of valuable times, and so on. So right now, if you're going to configure the schedule for the Valero backups, you're going to forget about it completely. And when and if something happens, you will no longer be afraid. You were like, for some reason, you wake up one morning and you discover your, I don't know, 3 of your production namespaces are gone. That's it. You don't have any backups. Now you remember that you configured the scheduled backup, 3 times a day. So you just, go back to your S3 bucket or GCR or GCS, sorry, or whatever, and you restore from there, and you're done. And now another feature that we used a couple of times, it's basically the last one that supports the pre and post backup hooks for the backup procedure. What it means is just it's like a lifecycle hooks in AWS, but for backups. So you can configure that each time that you take a backup or restoring or making any kind of actions with Valero, you can tell your pods or your services or your deployments or what you want them to do before or after. And this makes life much easier, because if you want to back up some application and you don't want it running while you do the backup, to avoid data corruption, to avoid access logs being corrupted or deleted or whatever. Let's say if it's an Nginx ingress, you can just gracefully, let's say what use case is gracefully shut down the Nginx ingress before you take a backup of it. So it will be a lot more smoother with no errors, and you can just pick up where you left off. So this tool is extremely fun to use. It's a very productive tool, and it's going to keep growing with a lot more capabilities on the way as feature requests. And we are closely monitoring it, and I recommend it. So thank you very much. Back to Iftach.
Thank you, John. So let's do a recap. The big question is, it might not be such a big question. I thought it was a big one. Now it's kind of clear to me what's going on. So my personal opinion, especially that I was part of a long project implementing Jenkins X, is Jenkins X will definitely replace Jenkins from the obvious reasons that Jenkins X is already used successfully in production. The community size and activity is decent and more than decent. Cloud-based engineers are actively developing the project, and these are the same engineers or colleagues of the engineers that were actively developing Jenkins, so it's kind of clear that if Cloud-based is shifting into Jenkins X, at some point it will replace it. It shows great, it shows signs for nice performance, and that's very important. And we've seen all the features about how it's durable and fault tolerant. But of course, it will take time, right? So many organizations are still invested in Jenkins. Jenkins has the whole world of plugins that everybody likes and want to use it. You have a plugin for everything you just think about, and it can be very comfortable. I see it as problematic because I was doing Jenkins for many years, and I know that these things can be pain. And I like opinionated platforms where I have maybe less options, let's say. I wouldn't say less flexibility, but less options. It's sometimes good, like less is more, like soda. And Jenkins X is still in emerging phase, right? So it's time to start work with Jenkins X. As said, some organizations do it in production, in the community, in the Slack. You can meet a lot of them, right? So that's things to understand. But again, as my personal opinion, in my personal opinion, it will replace it. It's just a matter of time. And let's talk about a case study we did. So we had a customer the idea actually came from him, and we kind of jumped on the opportunity. I think we agreed to do it, not surely at that time understanding the complexity of Jenkins X. We knew already Jenkins X at that time. We tried it already, but it was really, I think, almost a year ago, and it was just in the beginning. So we are talking about the project is migration of from Heroku PaaS. So to the ones who don't know, Heroku is a cloud application PaaS where you can again give code and receive workloads with auto-scaling made for you and so on. Kind of like AWS Beanstalk. And there was a migration of between 20 to 30 microservices to EKS and ECR and so on with Jenkins X for CI/CD. The project took a long time. It was our first Jenkins X project, and we learned a lot. Okay, we learned more about the experience with Jenkins X in production or in scale, more than just how to promote the application and so on. So it was harder time, but I think the Jenkins X, what we learned, that once you get on top of it, how to custom pipelines and how to configure promotions and how to add add-ons and configure these add-ons and to present new capabilities to Jenkins, and how it works with the boot and how it receives and how to upgrade it and receive changes from the boot repos maintained by the community and so on. It's worth it. You can feel that you can get in control and start to kind of flow and do a lot of things from that moment. And then in that point, onboarding projects and building projects becomes quite easy, quite flexible, and we really liked it. We had to be very active on the community, right? So we wrote, like Cloudzone alone, wrote in the community in the period of the phase of the project, like kind of like I asked for numbers from Slack because I don't have a way to see it. So it's something about 15,000 messages and 250 threads. We were every day on the Slack. Even for this demo, I was on the Slack because it passed some time and I needed some help. So we had to be very active, but at the end, we got the help. It was not easy, but we got the help, and there's enough people in the community to help, and that's a very positive sign already 1 year after the initiation of the project. We started the project with Jenkins, with classical Jenkins as the CI engine. We then saw that it was about to be deprecated. I think we could have started to shift to Tekton much faster. This change was in the middle of the project, so imagine that after we already wrote all the Jenkins pipelines, the groovy pipelines, as part of Jenkins X platform, which is anyway not native thing to do, but that was the option then. We then, in the middle of the project, had to rewrite all of the pipelines from Groovy into the new format of Jenkins X. We did it, but it was not so easy. But at the end, this is how we learned Jenkins X syntax properly. In addition, during the project, we also used JXL features. I said JXL is the alpha features. There was something fundamental there that we were tempted to try, which is the shift to Helm 3 with a Helm file. It also has better support for remote environments. So imagine Jenkins X support, not yet properly, but it will soon do it properly. But in the project, we implemented it anyway with overrides on the pipeline. Jenkins X supports remote environments on different clusters. Okay, so of course, you want your production environment not to be on the same cluster as the dev environment and the preview environment. So it's possible today with some work, but it will be supported better once these features of Helm 3 and Helm file will go inside. But on top of changing all the pipelines, we had also to kind of revert the changes from JXL to JX, and it was not easy. And then we realized that never use JXL features in production, even they are fundamental, like, I don't know, shift to Helm 3, which we see as fundamental change. And we learned that the community is there for us, and it's something which is a good sign. We also, or especially I also want to say thanks, special thanks, and I will make sure he sees this. So to James from CloudBees, he helped us tremendously, was with us through the community. He really helped us. I'm not sure we could be able to do it without him. So James is working for CloudBees. He's the creator of the GroovyLang and creator of Apache Camel. And as you see, on March 18, he announced Jenkins X, and is I think, the prime engineer that is actively developing Jenkins X from CloudBees side. So thank you. Really, it made the project possible. You can find James in many Jenkins X sessions on YouTube and from all kinds of conferences. And we will make sure he sees this special thanks. And thank you very much. I'm going to stay here for a while to answer questions in the chat. I hope this was insightful, and I hope you want to try Jenkins X, because we can help you. Thank you.